Chapter 5, The Flying Skateboard. Tuesday, June 1st, 4 days earlier. The sun had risen that morning on a day that would forever change a hedgehog, a lady, and the world in which they lived. The hedgehog's name was Chisel. He lived in a pine tree shaded town called Shady Glen. The town was in a hidden valley, which lay under a beautiful rainbow-colored sky that flowed and swayed like smoke in a breeze. By 8:30, Chisel had woken up, eaten, walked down the dirt road to the one-room schoolhouse, and was sitting in class when the teacher started talking about volcanoes and lava and magma and explosions and escaping gases from the center of the earth. After a few minutes, Chisel couldn't contain his excitement anymore and blurted out, "Let's go!" Everyone looked over at him, and realizing what he had done, Chisel sank down in his chair quite embarrassed. The teacher laughed and explained, "The only volcano around here is on Volcano Island, and it is active and far too dangerous to explore." Summer vacation was quickly approaching, and each student had to do a science project before school ended. Now Chisel knew what he would do. "I will journey to a distant island and look inside a volcano." After the science lesson, a rabbit on the far side of the room asked the teacher, "Who started our valley?" The teacher smiled. "I wish we knew, but we don't. There are no books that tell of the beginning of our hidden valley. It's our greatest and saddest mystery in the valley. Animals tried to solve it for years, but couldn't. It's what we desire most, but will never learn." Chisel sat staring at the ground in front of his desk and thinking, while the other students left the room for recess. He slowly raised his head and looked across the room at his friend Boodle, the rabbit who had asked the question. She had also just slowly looked up and over at him, and they both smiled, nodding their heads up and down. After school, Boodle walked home with Chisel. Her father owned the town grocery store. She was Chisel's best friend. They walked behind Chisel's house to a shed in the backyard, and from under a big pile of junk, Chisel pulled out an old dusty box with handwritten words on top that read, "Chisel and Boodle's detective stuff." "Remember this?" he asked Boodle. He opened it and pulled out 2 small black books to write clues in, a large magnifying glass, a container of white powder to take fingerprints with, a small telescope, and 2 detective hats. Chisel looked at Boodle and asked, "Do you think we can solve the mystery of who started our valley?" Boodle paused before answering. "I don't know. The mystery is probably over 100 years old." Then, at the same time, they both smiled and said, "Why not?" "I'm going to Volcano Island tomorrow after school," said Chisel. "I'll look for clues on the way." "And I'll visit the big city," added Boodle. The only question for Chisel was how to get to Volcano Island from his house. Boodle went home, and Chisel found his younger brother and asked, "What do you think, Doof?" "Well, you can make a flying skateboard," Doofer replied. "Well, don't be ridiculous. You can't make skateboards fly," responded Chisel. After he said it, though, his forehead wrinkled, and he started thinking, "Well, I guess you could put a little motor on it, and a pole with a handle on the front to hold on to, and some type of wings." He looked over at Doofer, paused, and exclaimed, "Well, what are you waiting for? We've got a flying skateboard to build." They got Chisel's skateboard and first put the pole and handle on. Then they found an old hair dryer to use for the motor, but when they connected it and turned it on, it made their feet too hot. Then they saw an old fan in the corner of the shed, and their eyes got really big, and they both smiled. Then they soon had the fan connected to the back of the skateboard. Now it was time for the really tricky part, the wings. At first they used an umbrella like a helicopter, Chisel pushed the skateboard down the road with all the speed he could muster and then started opening and closing that umbrella really fast. One time, he got the skateboard off the ground, but after 10 seconds, his arms were so tired that he stopped pumping and fell back down. Then they looked at the umbrella and got an idea. They cut it in half and connected the two pieces underneath the skateboard and tied a rope to each new wing. Finally, they pulled the rope up around the pole handle. Now, whenever they wanted the wings to open, they just pulled on those ropes. They wheeled the skateboard out to the road in front of their house for a test flight. Chisel turned on the fan and started racing down the road on the skateboard. After picking up speed, he pulled the ropes and, like a helium balloon someone let go of, he shot into the sky. Unfortunately, just like riding a bike for the first time, he had no idea how to control the skateboard, and was soon 100 feet in the air, flying wildly, yelling, "Ah! Wahoo! Hoot-baloot!" while doing loop-de-loops, banking left and right, and flying upside down, hanging from the handlebars.